Okay, let's talk about the neurons. Neurons being main functional units of the nervous system. And the main two types, first of all, neurons are the main functional unit in the nervous system, right? So there are three main functions of a neuron or neurons. First, carrying sensory information. So neurons carry sensory info from the peripheral receptors to the brain or to the spinal cord. You can see a typical sensory neuron right here. Sometimes sensory neuron is called unipolar. So in this case, you can see that two parts of the neuron, the dendrites and the axon, are fused and the cell body is separate. Interneurons, like this one, so-called bipolar neuron, is responsible for formulating various responses. You can see that in the case of this bipolar interneuron, its function is to integrate information or relay information. And then motor neurons that send responses to the organs, they are also called multipolar. Multiple dendrites and a single axon. Motor neuron obviously transmits the motor responses to the effectors, contains multiple dendrites, the single axon. So each neuron receives the information receives the signal on the dendrites and the soma. You can see soma is the same as the cell body. And then dendrites are these tree-like projections that extend from the cell body. This is the reception part. Now, the signals that arrive at dendrites and the cell body get integrated into the cell body and in the axonal hillock into a single output. Output signal travels through the axon to the next neuron. And you can see that it's basically a one-way street. Signal arrives on the dendrites, gets integrated in the cell body, and then travels through the axon to the next neuron. In many cases, the axon of a neuron is electrically isolated by the myelin sheath. You can see myelin sheath right here. This electrical isolation or electrical insulation by myelin makes the signal transmission through the neuron much faster. In some cases, human immune cells may attack the myelin sheath, damaging it, and that leads to the autoimmune condition, so known as multiple sclerosis. So in a nutshell, we've got three different types of neurons: motor, interneuron, and the sensory neuron. Motor neuron, also called multipolar neuron, delivers the responses to the effectors, such as muscles and glands. Interneurons are responsible for integration and relaying, formulating the responses. We also call them bipolar. And finally, sensory neurons, sometimes called unipolar, are delivering sensory information from the periphery to the brain or spinal cord. The receptive part of the neuron is dendrites and soma. The integration part of a given neuron is the soma and axonal hillock right here. And then axon is responsible for delivering the signal down the road. Not only neurons are present in the nervous system, other cells that do not transmit the signal, neuroglia cells. So there are two main types of neuroglial cells, ones that are found in the peripheral nervous system and ones that are found in the central. So two types of cells found in the peripheral nervous system are satellite cells here, which responsible for, they support neurons, nourish peripheral neurons, control the levels of carbon dioxide, neurotransmitters, so on and so forth. And Schwann cells actually myelinate axons. So they are necessary for electrical insulation of axons and also for the axonal regeneration to help axons regrow in case of the injury. In central nervous system, 4 cell types are oligodendrocytes. Also, electrical insulation. They form myelin sheath, provides some structural support. Microglial cells, they clean up the debris, destroy pathogens. Basically, they like large cells that eat pathogens and dead cells. Astrocytes, they perform important structural function. They maintain blood-brain barrier, a barrier between the blood and the brain that is hardly penetrable by anything except maybe respiratory gases. They regulate the concentrations of nutrients and respiratory gases. If brain gets damaged, they form a scar tissue. In some way, astrocytes are similar functionally to satellite cells. And finally, ependymal cells here that produce cerebrospinal fluid. They can be found in the ventricles in the central canal of the spinal cord. Now, neurons are often organized in arches. And here is the example of a typical reflex arch. Let's explain what reflex is. Reflex is the rapid response to some kind of stimulus. Say you step on a nail and you immediately lift your foot up and you stand on undamaged foot, or somebody grabs you by an arm and you pull the arm away. So this is the sensation, you stepping on a nail. Sensation is picked up by the sensory or afferent neuron. Okay, so receptor here picks up the sensation. Sensation is transmitted via sensory neuron into the CNS. In this case, it's a spinal cord. So you see interneuron integrates the information, forms the response, and then this response is delivered via the motor neuron to the effector, which is a muscle or a gland. So that's a basic mechanism of the reflex arch. Sensory receptor picks up the sensation. That sensation, that signal goes through the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, interneuron picks up and integrates the information, formulates the response. The response is delivered through the efferent or motor neuron to the effector.